Alright, so I'm going to do another Frost Mage commentary. This one's going to be over a 28 tyrannical Atal'Dazar from last week. And this was a group that I kind of subbed in for last week. One of their players was gone, and I got invited to join their group for last week when he was gone. So I was kind of filling in for them. So I'm going to go over my talents here for this key. I decided to run something a little bit different for this Atal'Dazar. I was running the Tempest Barrier instead of my typical Spell Steal or Remove Curse. There is a Spell Steal and a Remove Curse for this key, but I needed to run Tempest Barrier for defensive value on the last boss. And then other than that, I was just running your typical general tree with Ice Flows. I always pick Ice Flows over Shimmer. And for the main tree, that's going to be the one thing that's going to be different with this than normal. I decided to actually, because a lot of our pulls with this group were target capped, both with our brew pulls typically smaller just because brew survivability is struggling a little bit. But obviously our brew survives fine, but we also pull around the warrior and the rogues. Typically their other DPS is a warrior, so they have like all three target capped classes. So they typically pull just very small pulls, and then like continuously just do small pulls because they always have CDs for them. So instead of running Freezing Rain, I decided to run Big Ray, which obviously is a pretty significant loss in AoE, but I was already losing a lot of value in AoE regardless because it was like smaller pulls. It was like anywhere between like 5 and like 8 targets. So in this key, especially because the bosses are a pretty big check, I decided to run Big Ray instead of Freezing Rain. So I ran Cryopathy. Other than that, it's your typical tyrannical key, your tyrannical weak tree. And then for this key, I also just ran. I also ran the verse file to start, and then at the last boss, we end up swapping to Icy Preservation just for an additional defensives, because the last boss basically one-shots us on these keys on Tyrannical with Soul Rend. Yeah, I had to get the Icy Prez out of my mailbox. We're good now.
Okay then, we go. We put the key in soon. There we go.
But yeah, those are my talents for this. Obviously a little bit different. I lost a significant amount of overall doing that, but I definitely did better with boss damage on Tyrannical. But yeah. The Priestess boss, honestly the Priest and the Totem boss are kind of fuck you.
You want both packs?
They are pulling both of the Sarads into the first boss, which definitely hurts me a little bit, but I don't worry about it too much. I pop mirror images going in. And then obviously I'm going to be running, because I don't have Freezing Rain, I have to hard cast my Blizzard. And then using my... At this point I probably should have had my Orb out to begin with already, just because getting it on cooldown is, and my Blizzard. But I decided to use my Balefire early on. I probably should have waited until after the first Terrifying Misses, just because obviously I'm going to need to hide and have a short window where I can't DPS, but... Now for this boss, there's different ways to get rid of the Pursuit. Anybody in your group can Shadow Meld to get rid of the Pursuit for anybody. And other than that, if you like for mages, if we have it on us, our G-Invis works to drop it. So we can call if we want to just use G-Invis. Now, I don't entirely know if you can use G-Invis during the cast or it has to be after the cast. So I was just being safe and did it after the cast actually started.
Oh my god, you fucking killed me with crazy on that. I didn't. What? I gave you Bard. Okay, well, that was crazy. I was literally sitting in tired.
Other than that, just typical single target for this boss. There's not a whole lot to say for Rezan, because he's literally just has 2 mechanics. So he's kind of a boring boss, but...
Yeah, you can do that. I know, I do. just I forget it.
You should start tracking it in part of your week or a kit.
I am tracking it.
Oh, yeah, you put it next to like your...
Now here I should have just flurried into my glacial spike, but I decided not to. I also have Bellfire up here, so I'm assuming I wait till after the terrifying visage to use it. I do not have this.
And you know what? I wouldn't use it.
Oh, let's go. Bark for me, daddy.
Now we don't have any Shadow Melds or Invises here, so I actually have to run away. It's pretty good. You can either do this side or the other side. The other side is good if you want to grab the raptors that are up above. You can pull the raptors into the boss. It saves a little bit of time for percent-wise, but... Other than that, this boss is obviously a pretty boring and patchworky kind of boss. There's not a whole lot to go over for this.
Yeah, it was.
What are the seekers?
One for sure. Hopefully only just one.
So we are actually pulling it over to the Raptors. Pulling it over at the end of the fight. You can pull it over a little earlier, or you can do it like at the beginning, but... Whipped by a tail? Why did I just get whipped by his tail? I actually don't know what the tail hit happens from, but I was a little confused there. Sometimes you can pull these raptors in, so we're pulling these raptors next. There's two here. Sometimes you can pull those actually into the boss and just obviously cleave them down. It would have been good, obviously, to pull them in for me, just because 3 target, I could have used my Cone Cold reset, but...
We're going to the middle one.
I just won't even freeze them. Obviously, on pulls like this, too, it's a little unfortunate for Frost Mage, because the Warrior and Rogue can just DPS this entire time while we're kiting, and I'm not, because I don't want to slow them at all. I hadn't Comet Stormed at all. I was waiting for my Comet Storm here for the mob to get the Skyscraper to get closer to melee. So, and now here I'm going to use Big Ray with my. I didn't use Balefire.
You chicken giving me crazy shield sometimes.
Yeah, that's the trinket.
Okay. That's like again. I did not use a shield there, and I
Mass
had a
barrier.
shield.
Mass
for
barrier,
almost
I
my
swear.
entire health bar.
This area is kind of big.
It is your entire health bar, but it's like kind of RNG whether or not. I get it.
No, this pack you can stay in melee. The Juggernauts are baited on people in range.
I mean, I'm gonna be pressing.
So I actually am.
Trees, and then they're gonna be charging to the trees.
Yeah, I'm close enough here that I was actually getting charged to. So you actually need to be like legitimately in melee in order to bait the assaults. So with the Resto Druid, the Juggernauts can actually dash to their Guardians of the whatever they're called. So they dash to this one and obviously hit me with his Merciless Assault and one shots me in on 28. You need to be like legit on top of them in order to not get charged to and to be considered as not ranged. And I know we have Typhoon now, so I'm not worrying about getting charged. Now that one I didn't get one shot by because I had a shield going already, so... I am kind of just taking RNG here and whether or not I'm getting charged or not by the Juggernauts.
Good tech, good tech.
Yep, I was gonna stun the charge. But then
You see I got hit by that one and basically almost got one shot. They're really hard to dodge for these ones. Like, if we go back,
the
I
charge.
see him casting Merciless Assault. I think you actually would have to blink them to dodge them.
Never mind.
Good tech, good tech.
Yep, I was gonna stun
But literally halfway through his Merciless Assault cast, I'm already moving and I still get hit by his AoE. So that's something that you would want to use Shimmer for, if you're talented into Shimmer, or
Alright,
I'm doing great damage.
Watch the fucker.
Or just make sure you're an actual melee.
Bro, he's crazy.
I've tried to do that every time, and that's the first time it's happened.
Yeah, with this fucking totem. Okay, bro.
Now, it's because I wasn't running Freezing Rain, I was deciding not to hardcast Blizzard at a certain target count. I think the target count that I was hardcasting Blizzard on was like 5 targets, just to get the Orb CDR, but no, I was talking about the spell.
Oh, yes.
I didn't dodge this one.
So now I casted Blizzard on this, which I probably shouldn't have just because 2 target and no Freezing Rain. You wouldn't even cast Blizzard on here. Typically on 2 targets, you only cast Blizzard with your instant casts. And then 3 targets when you do it with the heart. You actually hard cast Blizzard on 3 targets. Because I'm not running Freezing Rain, I'm not sure the exact target count when you should be and should not be casting it.
That's sick.
They're not stacked.
I'm assuming you lose a little bit of value, so it's probably like 3 and then 5 or something like that. So here's when I would cast Blizzard. So I was saying going into this AoE pull, casting Blizzard to start.
we're skipping the back in front of Vol'kaal.
I don't have
And this was kind of a troll Ray, so I was deciding to focus the Honor Guard just because it's the main thing that's going to be doing the damage. At this point in time, the totem hadn't been dead when I started my Ray, so like the first like 2 or 3 takes of my Ray just like did nothing because he just healed it back up. And obviously, see, I'm struggling pretty heavily in these AoE packs with only like 5 targets. I lose to the Brew in a lot of these pulls.
I'd actually just have 0 damage from totems.
And now here I wasn't positive. I didn't know what our route was.
Yeah.
Oh, we
No,
don't.
not the one in front, but we do.
So I was afraid of popping my Icy Veins here. I could have popped Icy Veins. I think I end up popping Icy Veins in the next pack. Yeah, you heard me just call that as well. As you see, my damage is struggling. Obviously, I went into that pack with no cooldowns, no bail or anything either. So.
Sorry, I'll roll the second one.
Actually, can you mark me here?
And I was using Ray here on AoE. Just because I was taking Big Ray, I was being a little bit more lenient with when I was casting Ray. Obviously, I wanted to cast Ray in my Balefire window as well, so since I started the pull with my AoE Balefire, I also wanted to use Ray while my Balefire was still active.
Oh, that's
Unfortunately, a lot of these pull counts are pull counts that are really like bad numbers for Frost. We struggle basically anywhere between like 3 and 6 targets, which unfortunately is exactly where Outlaw Rogue and Warrior thrive in. So it's a little unfortunate, but we just deal with it, which is the reason why I ran Crowpathy in this key instead of
fine. Gary, but it was only staggered.
Freezing Rain, because I know I was not getting good value in AoE regardless, so I just kind of wanted to go a little bit more single target.
You good?
Make sure you're not too close to the door.
Who doesn't have damage? Who am I going with?
Or you'll get back. Get back. There.
You want back or left?
You get that
Back.
one.
Okay,
Two,
okay.
one.
Watch your step.
Yeah, this fucks.
Does fuck.
Watch your step.
And I was debating on using Balefire here or not. I probably could have, but I didn't know what our damage profile was for the totems. I think, yeah, it looks like I did use, but I didn't use Balefire, which, if I'm using Ray, I probably should just use Balefire. So that was a mistake on my part there.
There's no damage. I'm coming towards it.
I will stop on my totem.
No, you can go. I can touch it. Soon. Soon. We can kill pretty much any time now. I have touch.
Don't touch me.
Just lost this.
I know this is the area. I'm not the only ranged here because we do have a Resto Druid. I typically like trying to kite myself around the outside of the room. So you'll see I kind of get cut off a lot of the times just due to the toxic pools that spawn. You also have to be really aware of the toxic pools because if you're in it for any more than I think 2 seconds, you basically get like one shot. So
Yeah, just straight sideways the entire time.
Yeah.
now I should be using Balefire here as well,
My keyboard is. That's
which I did here. So that was a good use of Balefire. I could have used it with my Glacial Spike in the air to get a little bit more value, but it's not too big an issue.
It's just weird.
But you see here, I'm kind of getting cut off in the rest of the room, which I end up using Blink to either get back to the center, or I blink over to this outside and kind of continue kiting around.
Probably should.
Probably have to move slower.
Yeah, I think we do have to move slower.
Yeah. All right.
Let's go. Let's go.
This boss obviously hurts a lot. Obviously, I'm also out of range of our healer a lot of the time with the way I'm baiting, which is not good. I should be probably playing around the middle more because they're going to be cutting around the outside. I kind of just didn't want to stack really with my Resto Druid because I didn't want us to both. I didn't want to have so many pools that I had to move very very frequently. So I was kind of moving on my own and being away from them, which obviously hurt for my own sustainability. Because I was constantly either out of LOS or not in our Resto Druid's F-Flow. But I was being very liberal with my barrier usage and everything else. I never used my G-Invis or my Ice Cold though. Like there, if I would have stayed in that for another second, I would have just ticked and died. It takes you for around 600k, I believe. Oh, so here's where I used Ice Cold, so I realized that we were going to be out of range. I was out of range of my healer. They were continuously moving, and then we had the Noxious Stench debuff. They're continuously moving away, and I used my Ice Cold, knowing that I was going to be out of range. I did have basically all the hots on me that I could have, but this is where I decided to use my Ice Cold for both healing and as a defensive value.
Baiting in there. Yep. Yeah, or he was just out of range, half the.
Yeah, so I could have been kiting around the center of the room to obviously be closer to our Resto Druid, but I decided to kind of make sure that we had better baits, or at least that our baits weren't going to be an issue later on in the fight. And now again, this is where I struggle because I'm not running AoE, and I kind of just let the rogues and the warrior do well the funnel, but.
It's reverse steps. So if chicken goes or Oreo goes stands on the thing, you won't get jumped on.
Well, I was in the dungeon by myself, and I did it. They jumped to me, so
Yeah, because you're the only one there.
okay.
So here I'm hard casting Ray when there's still 6 targets up, just because I kind of want to get as much value out of Cryopathy as I can. Okay, probably shouldn't have popped it onto this then, but I will.
We can play middle later. Too.
Yeah,
we
so
go?
you pick the shoot bitch.
Go in 2 seconds. 2 seconds.
I do pull the middle, so I'm full focusing the Dinomancer just due to the health difference. And then you need to make sure you're using defensives for every Wild Thrash, especially while the Thrashes are up. which obviously that'll, or the Sards are up, which is obviously only at the very beginning. And then I believe that as a range kick, you can solo kick the dynamite. It looks like it's on about a 30-second cast. So we should be able to kick every single dynamite that does get casted.
Oh, nice critter you got on Oreo.
Like it? My little pet. So I was deciding still to hardcast Blizzard here. I think that's actually probably not ideal with not running Freezing Rain to not run it, because you're obviously going to lose the damage from Blizzard, which obviously Blizzard damage isn't a lot, but...
Oh, what? Wait. Watch charge it. Baiting it in the wrong spot.
I also should have waited a little bit for my Cone of Cold there. My Comet Storm was literally just about to be off cooldown.
Watch charge it. Baiting it in the wrong spot.
I literally had like 2 seconds left on my Comet Storm window, so I lost basically 25 seconds worth of the Comet Storm cooldown.
Charging in a weird spot.
Mage, can you kick that down?
We're good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you can pull the next box if you want. I have huge damage. And they need to die somehow, right?
This is where I'm casting Blizzard because it's like 10 targets, so I'll actually get value out of Ice Color here, even though I'm not running Freezing Rain.
Probably just change.
Try to pick up your blood late on this boss and yeah, have a defensive or something. I don't know.
Yeah, this boss hurts too.
Yeah, this thing will fuck.
Yep.
I think I just sit in D-stance the whole time.
Well, like when the blood is out.
Yeah, when I have blood.
Now again, not positive if casting Blizzard on 5 target here.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is unfortunately we were very bad with this throughout the entire day. Apparently they have issues with this when they're actually doing their keys with their double warrior comp, but they don't have anything to kind of call when they're reflecting other than just comms themselves. So they were double reflecting the wildfire, and I actually DB'd both of them. So that's a comms diff.
Because you don't have the weak for it, dude.
I mean,
Need
true.
a fight, bro.
If you get the weak for it,
But my job for this key, obviously since I am running the cryo and not AoE, I'm just basically single targeting any of the power mobs in the packs. So for this pack, I'm focusing the augurs, which are the people that cast the wildfire, and then obviously those last packs, I was single targeting the Dinomancer in the center, or the any of the Screechers. Obviously in this pack, it'll again be prioing the augur, even though the Juggernaut's a higher health. The augur is the only thing that can really wipe the group, other than the merciless assaults from the Juggernauts.
Yep.
but if you had the weak for it, it would say you could reflect.
Exactly.
Then shit.
So you see I'm just deleting the augur. I'm using Ray in literally like 7 targets, which is not ideal, but... And then I'm not worrying about the charges because we had Typhoon down.
Yeah, I can see that too.
And you see the augur's dead now, so now I should be focusing the Juggernaut.
Don't worry, still chose me.
It still target.
So where's your damage then?
Fucked up, man. No, it's like,
Oh, there's no blood anywhere. Oh, just kidding, there is. Oh well. Wait,
Do you want to kill
this is gonna be news to me.
Oh, there's no blood anywhere.
Oh, they're raging, never mind.
Oh well.
I take it back. Unfortunately, this is also a raging week, so Frost loses a lot of value with any of our shatters in pure AoE. This is one of the only affixes, this and Storming, that I would say some DPS classes, well, some DPS classes, meaning Frost Mage, actually loses significant amount of damage from. Raging is, I'd say, worse than Sanguine. I wouldn't really say it's worse than Sanguine in terms of the damage lost, but we're the only DPS that needs to actually have the mobs frozen in order to like get shatters for AoE. So as soon as mobs were like below 30% health, and if they were raging, And I noticed they were raging. I didn't worry about doing like Glacial Spike, Ice Nova.
I'll get the far back left one.
And now for this, you need to make sure you're using defensives for every single one of the transfusion phases. So I use Alter Time, and I have Mirror Images rolling.
I'll just took mine.
What? I'm
And
sorry.
I use a Barrier,
That's
and then
fine.
Mass Barrier.
Killing anyone.
So I basically used, for this one, I used four defensives. I used Mirror Images, and then I used both Barriers. I wanted to try getting back in the F-Low to get obviously the additional healing from a Resto Druid. So this next one I'm probably planning on using G-Invis or Ice Cold for. I did cancel my Ray here. I wanted to make sure I didn't get hit by this. I could have used an Ice Flows to continue the cast, but I did not. I was being bad. And I'm pre-setting up where I'm taking the blood from. I G-Invised here. I did G-Invis a little early, so I end up getting the last full 3 ticks of this at full power. I probably should have waited until the actual transfusion cast started, which it's a 5-second cast. So if I G-Invis when it started, I would have only gotten the last 1 or 2 ticks at full.
Can we come this side?
I'll take the one in the back there.
I'll take that one.
Take this one I'm standing next to.
I get the next boss. Next to the boss.
Now again, here should be another Alter Time going in. I should be using Ice Cold for this. The only reason I'm not is I kind of wanted to save my big defenses for last boss. I was very, very worried about my survivability on Yazma, both from Soul Rend and from Racking Pain. So I was trying to be rather... I was trying to game my Alter and my all my defensives. So I should have been using Ice Cold here just to be safe, but I felt like I wouldn't have died, so I didn't really worry about it.
Just grab some of these early ones. Grab one of them. Hey, we have to kill one.
Hell.
Pretty sure I die here at a transfusion. Yeah.
Guys.
Oh, he has 26 mil again.
This is where I should have been using my Ice Cold. I didn't have mirror or anything else up.
Take this or should I leave for last boss? I'm leaving for last. I'm leaving for last.
I didn't want to take this Beerus either because I knew the last boss is obviously the main trouble point of this key. But obviously this Priestess key is not this Priestess boss is not an easy one either. Neither is the Totem boss.
Wait, what?
I don't know, bro. I don't know. That was maybe.
Both of you guys just got the same one?
Yeah.
What
And now for this last boss, we do swap over, or at least I do. I'm not sure what the other people do. I swapped over to Icy Preservation, which instead of a verse file, which is 6% verse, or 3% verse or something like that, or 5% verse, I think actually. It's a flat verse rating. This is a. I'll go back and pause it when I mouse over it. Its damage taken while above 50% health is reduced by. Damage taken is decreased by 6% while over at 50% health, but increased by 6% while under 50% health. So basically this entire boss fight, I won't be under 50% health unless I have the Racking Pain debuff, but the main trouble points of this boss are going to be the Soul Rends that happen every 30 seconds, and you should be topped to 100% health every time that's happening, unless you obviously have Racking Pain on you, which if you do, you're going to be using a big defensive for regardless. But for the first file itself, I think it's... I want to say it's like 4% verse or 3% verse or something like that. So basically, file up Icy Preservation is basically another 3% DR. Obviously, as you get to higher and higher keys, that DR is going to be very important. So I was trying out Icy Preservation on a few bosses. I think we tried it out on a few other bosses this week as well. But this is like a main boss that I knew I was going to need it on. So I think when I was looking at it earlier on like a 26 Atal I did earlier, it hit me for, I think through barrier, through my own barrier, it hit me down to like 5% health or something like that. So I knew I was going to need the extra DR, obviously on a 28. And this is probably my least favorite boss in probably this entire tier. It's very, very toxic for range players. It's obviously not as bad for melee, but it is still really bad. but we are basically kiting the boss the entire room, and it's not just the tank kiting the boss, it's all of the DPS and healers and everything have to be kiting continuously throughout the entire room to dodge the spiders. So I'll kind of talk over what our strat was for this.
You vanish.
Alright.
It's not even recast. Okay, that's sick.
Alright, so Soul Rend. So at the beginning of Soul Rend, I wanted to test to see if I was just going to survive with just Barrier. Which we'll see. I do survive. With just Barrier, I get hit down to 11% health with the Icy Preservation, so obviously the DR is helping a lot there. I think our rogue got one shot. Which was rather unfortunate. But obviously this is why I wanted to save the B-Res in the previous boss. We knew the previous boss was going to die, and I wasn't really worried about it. And then you can use for every other one. So the Soul Rend timings are 35 seconds, I believe, before the casts. So you don't have Cone of Cold for every single Soul Rend, but you'll have it for every other. So you can use your Cone of Cold to reset and get orbs and Comet Storms. Typically, I wasn't using my Comet Storms on these ads. I was just throwing an orb at them and then going back to focusing the boss.
Dude.
I can rally the next one. Or do you have bark? Can you use bark on it? I think I
I can just mass barrier this next one.
So this is where it gets really toxic for range players, especially with me. We do have another range for the Resto Druid, but another thing that I could have been gaming, which was why I took the talents to begin with, is I took Tempest Barrier. It's something I was very unfamiliar with because I just don't typically take it because I didn't want to lose those talent points from that Rare Energy or other talents like Spell Steal or Remove Curse. But for this boss, getting basically a 6% shield every time I blink. If I just blink every time Soul Rend happens, that's another 6% health that I'm getting, which is obviously massive on keys like this. So I got Racking Pain here. The way I was dealing with Racking Pain, I alter timed it. So as long as when I go into Racking Pain, I knew Racking Pain wasn't going to one-shot me. I knew the Soul Rend actually hurts more than Racking Pain. And if I got one-shot by... since I didn't get one-shot by Soul Rend, I knew I wasn't going to get one-shot by Racking Pain. So I go into Alter. And it hits me down to like 25% health. And then I just alter back to full.
Obviously, my S is fucked up again.
And now we're going to have Soul Rend. So this is Mass Barrier. And this should have been a blink into here to get another shield. That one only hit me down to like 20% health. I believe we did not rally this one. But I am trying to save. You can save it. I think it's actually beneficial for us too as well. You can actually get your Glacial Spike shatters on these mobs because they're freezable. So you can save a Glacial Spike in your Ice Nova for every single one of the Soul Rend sets. Obviously, this is a really toxic now with having spiders. Ice Flows does help a little bit with this, just because I can run while casting with the spiders. But it gets to a certain point where, like, now I literally have 0 Ice Flows. So no, I'm just constantly kiting for the rest of the fight.
Where we go far after this.
Now I mirror imaged here. I probably should not have mirror imaged. I get Racking Pain again here, so I know I'm gonna... It's actually kind of good that I used mirror images. And then I used just Barrier, and I'm getting just tapped by my healer other than that, so I got a Swiftman from them as well.
I'll ice cold this one.
And now, because I didn't have any defense, I didn't have Barrier going into this one, because I used Barrier for Soul Rend. You heard me call it. Because I was only surviving Soul Rend with my Barrier, which was like 20-25% of your health or whatever it is, I called that I was going to Ice Cold this one, so I'm using Ice Cold as a DR. And then you see I'm holding my Glacial Spike. And I'm using my Glacial Spike to shatter on these.
On easy.
Now I am staying further behind just to try and bait as many spiders away from the melee as possible. Because I know that some spiders are going to be running at me, which I'm not sure if that's actually beneficial or not, because then these spiders will be slightly unaligned from later on when we're on the other side of the room. But when the echoes of Shadra happens, it also kind of baits pools near you as well. The spider spawns. I'm getting Racking Pain here, so I do another Alter Time for it.
Did Seal say he has something?
I know I didn't need anything for this because I got the massive shield from our Resto Druid, which I'm not sure exactly what it's from. I believe it's this. But I think it's their trinket. I did blink, so I had the Tempest Barrier shield. And then I used, obviously, the Glacial Spike. I haven't been using my Cone of Cold resets, so I should have been. So this is the fourth one now of the fight. It's obviously it's happening every 35 seconds. That was the fourth one. And obviously you see it's getting to a point where we're getting stuck in corners. Obviously, as well, when any of the echoes get stuck in between spiders, since I am the only range in the group, it's kind of my priority in this group in order to focus them. So, but also another part that I hate about this boss is we used Lust on pull, and you see we're 2.5 minutes into the boss, and the boss isn't even at 50%. So it's nice and interesting. I really enjoy bosses like this. Not.
Can you melt?
Or Seal on this one?
Mass barrier.
Seal.
So I shouldn't have used my own personal barrier there because I was going to use mass barrier. It's something that I didn't really call beforehand, but I should have called that I was going to use mass barrier so we didn't need to bark. But again, I did use my Cone of Cold reset on that one.
Watch the spiders under boss.
Now there is a way for ranged and any other melee. If spiders are getting really cramped right here, you can actually run up here and then run around. It's actually not a bad spot to bait spiders because the spiders like try running up here and kind of get out of the way and then they have to run back. So if you want to, you can try and bait up here. Again, since I'm the only ranged, I'm trying to focus the I'm trying to focus the echoes down a little bit more.
I have low damage from this,
Now I did get Racking Pain here,
Go inside.
and I used Ice Cold. I didn't have, the only reason I used that here is because, so I had Barrier going in, which was okay. But then, since I knew I was getting Racking Pain and I had nothing else going and I was farther away from the group, I decided to use Ice Cold. Probably not ideal. I probably could have just mirror imaged and you saved Icy Cold for a later on point in case I actually needed it. But
We'll go inside in the cubby.
I'm clicking this. I'm clicking this.
I did use obviously my Tempest Barrier there for the extra 6% shield and then my own barrier. Now I did Blizzard here, so the Blizzard was one for a slow and 2 for the CDR on my orb. Because I didn't have Cone of Cold and we also said we had no damage, I knew I was actually going to need to be focusing these mobs a little bit more.
Watch spiders.
Understood.
And I think I had Racking Pain.
Watch spiders.
Yeah, I had Racking Pain. I could have G-Invised.
Understood.
I just wasn't paying attention to who the Racking Pain was on. Which I'm glad now that we had the B-Reses and I didn't use one on the previous boss. I probably should add a target on like my boss frame one because I have my target frame here, but then I didn't have anything from my boss frame, so I kind of lost who the boss was targeting.
I can't kill that out. It's out
So that's a UI diff. But again, I'll touch point on this again. We are now 4 minutes into this fight that we used Lust on, and the boss is at 30%.
Get out of here.
I canceled my Ray there, just to make sure that I was grouped up with them for Soul Rend. I did G-Invis Racking Pain. So for our group, it's very beneficial for warriors if they can spell reflect Racking Pain. I should have been able to live the initial hit and could have used G-Invis if I wanted to for afterwards. But I think it's best for me to G-Invis in case it does go on the warrior since they can spell reflect. But
if
Yeah.
you will.
Now, for these, I should have been like blinking into the wall in order to get my Tempest Barrier shield, just for the little extra. Obviously, I had my own personal shield, but I was mass burying because we were saying our rogue didn't have any defensives or anything. And now I'm probably gonna get trapped here from the spiders. Yeah, I was getting trapped and I blinked out.
We just focus boss now.
Z, yep.
I will rob away if we need.
And now this is where I was talking about where range can bait up here, and you'll see the spiders like start running up here.
I
And
feel like we played really bad. Their
it
damage
was
is
sketchy, but it was also not the worst. We've had worse runs.
Yeah.
Let's go.
But you see that? How long was that boss fight? That boss fight is almost 6 minutes with Lust on a 28 Tyrannical. So very unfortunate how rough that boss fight is. That could be a potential boss fight where you run out of the instance and swap back to like pure single target raid build. I think it just depends on how much time you have. But
Let's go.
obviously I struggled. I've been struggling a lot in these overalls for keys. I got blown out of the water on all the keys we did with this group. One, probably just the target cap stuff. Two, I wasn't really familiar with routes and stuff. But obviously, all of them are very good players regardless of the fact of that. But definitely Frost Mage didn't really fit well, like great into their comp just due to the pull sizes and stuff like that. I did give them an actual Lust because their actual group didn't have a Lust. But yeah, this was the 28 Tyrannical Atal'Dazar. You see, I did 201k overall versus their 255 and 260. So I was obviously far behind on overalls, but obviously my prior target damage was very strong, especially running Cryopathy. I'm not sure if I do run with the group again. I'm not sure if I continue doing that. I think I do as long as there's not keys that are like mass AoE. Like I think I might run it for things like Dark or maybe like Dark Heart or something like that. Or I think Atal is obviously a decent one to run it for, just because it's prio mobs and the Sorods don't really matter. But yeah, that is the commentary for the 28 Tyrannical Atal'Dazar. I definitely ran a little bit more defensive this key. I was out running C-Star as well to make sure I was getting up the verse. Obviously, I lost some verse rating because I swapped off of verse file and went to Icy Prez, which is just the extra. I think it's like around an extra like 3% DR when you're above 50% health. But yeah, I'm still running 21% verse for these keys. As a Frost Mage, that's not necessarily ideal, but it seems to be that that's what's going to be needed as you go higher and higher in these keys, especially since the group isn't running an Augmentation Evoker, so we lose a little bit of defensive value there. But obviously, I'm going to be getting probably anywhere between probably around 50k more health by the time the tier ends, anyways. So I'll be a little bit more safer with that in regards to it, because I think we're only around 480 item level here, which at the end of the tier you'll be around 488 or something like that. But yeah, that is all for the commentary for the 28 Tyrannical Atal'Dazar, and I hope you guys enjoyed the commentary.